Me and two other friends, who we'll call Rob and Brad, were having a sleepover and around 1 a.m. decided to sneak out, because we are young teens looking for fun. We didn't stay out long, only walked around the local town and chatted. We start heading back already, being cautious since it was late and we had no idea who was out and about until we passed a shop exiting a T-junction towards a local street leading to the house in complete darkness due to street lights turning off at 1 a.m. That's when we see a beat-up white van coming around the corner. Brad makes a subtle joke of us being kidnapped when the van just stops right next to us. For context, all shops are closed and there's no one and nothing around us. No reason for him to stop. That's when we all processed the situation and ran about 15 to 20 seconds down this long pitch black road towards Brad's house. We stop, talking about what just happened in a scared manner and continue to just walk down the short road leading to the house, checking behind us regularly. That's when Rob and Brad see a man walk around the same corner the van had stopped at. No one was around, so we knew that it was the guy driving the van. We question who and why the man was there until he dips back around the corner, and about 5 seconds later, the van came whipping back around the corner and without thought we began running again. I didn't see the man go back, taking a right onto a new road. This road has many streets with houses spouting off it, and luckily, ours was the first to the left. While still running, we hear the van getting close and full-out sprint around to the street, and Brad and Rob managed to hide behind cars, whereas I stood there in shock and watched the van pass by the road at a fast pace before he slows to presumably turn around. However, it is quite hard to make a U-turn on that road. We run around halfway down the street. Brad's house is just at the end, before slowing down to a walk whilst looking over our shoulders and ahead while questioning what would happen if he caught up to us teens. Brad is scared out of his mind and was contemplating ways to escape if he returned before he and I spot a house light and mistake it for the headlights of the car and begin running again to his house, which was like a 10-second run from our location, and we all rapidly jump into his room from the window. His room is on the bottom floor, and now I am sitting here writing the events. This is all a true story, and we are quite shook up and still questioning what happened. My muscles ached pleasantly as I left the gym, my usual endorphin rush slowly ebbing away. The evening air was cool, and I decided to take a shortcut through a desolate part of town to get home faster. The route was poorly lit and rarely traveled, but I was eager to get home and unwind. Besides, I had taken this shortcut before without any trouble. The streets were eerily silent, the only sounds coming from my footsteps echoing off the buildings. I pulled my hoodie tighter around me, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling that had been creeping over me lately. For the past few weeks, I had been getting strange private messages on social media from random accounts. They were mostly just creepy comments, but some were more personal, referencing places I had been and people I knew. I had assumed it was my ex, Mark, who had become obsessive towards the end of our relationship. I quickened my pace, the uneasy feeling growing stronger. I glanced over my shoulder, but the street behind me was empty. Just my paranoia, I told myself, and kept walking. But the sense of being watched was persistent, gnawing at my nerves. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. They were slow and deliberate, matching my pace. My heart started to race as I sped up, my gym bag bouncing against my hip. The footsteps quickened too. I turned my head slightly, catching a glimpse of a shadowy figure about 20 feet behind me. Panic surged through me. I pulled out my phone and tried to call for help, but my hands were shaking too badly to unlock it. The footsteps were getting closer, echoing louder in the stillness of the night. I broke into a run, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I darted into an alley, hoping to lose whoever was following me, but it was a dead end. Desperation clawed at my throat as I turned to face the entrance, my back against the cold brick wall. The figure emerged from the shadows, a tall man with a hood pulled low over his face. His eyes gleamed with a predatory hunger. "Stay away from me," I shouted, my voice trembling. He didn't respond. Instead, he took a step closer, a cruel smile spreading across his face. I could see the glint of something metallic in his hand, a knife. Fear paralyzed me for a moment, but then adrenaline kicked in. I screamed at the top of my lungs, hoping someone would hear me. The man lunged, but I swung my gym bag at him, the heavy weight catching him off guard. He staggered back, giving me just enough time to dart past him and back onto the street. I ran blindly, my only thought to get away. I could hear him cursing behind me, his footsteps pounding the pavement. I didn't stop until I reached a busy main road, the bright lights and sounds of traffic a stark contrast to the dark, deserted alley. I burst into a convenience store, gasping for breath, and the clerk looked at me in alarm. "Call the police," I managed to say, my voice shaking. They arrived quickly, but my pursuer had vanished. I knew it had to be Mark. The messages, the stalking, it all made sense. But they couldn't find him, and I was left with the lingering terror that he was still out there, waiting for another chance to get me. The late shift had been brutal, but finally, it was over. The clock had just ticked past 1 a.m. when I locked up the office and stepped into the cool night air. My mind was heavy with worries, bills piling up, debts I couldn't pay, and the constant pressure to provide for my family. I trudged to my car, eager to get home and collapse into bed. As I drove through the empty streets, I noticed a car in my rearview mirror. It had been behind me since I left work, but at this hour, the roads were usually deserted. My heartbeat quickened. I owed some dangerous people money, and the thought that they might come after me was never far from my mind. But this felt different, more sinister. I took a few random turns, hoping to shake them, but the car stayed on my tail, its headlights glaring into my mirror. Panic surged through me. I couldn't lead them back to my family. I needed to lose them. Spotting an old, abandoned store up ahead, I made a split-second decision. I veered off the main road and into the store's cracked parking lot, my tires screeching. I jumped out of the car and sprinted towards the building, praying the darkness would swallow me up. The store was a derelict shell, its windows shattered and walls covered in graffiti. I slipped through a broken door and crouched behind a row of dusty shelves, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I could hear the car idling outside, then the slam of a door. Footsteps crunched on the gravel, getting closer. Just then, a faint light flickered on the other side of the store. I crept towards it, desperate to find another way out. As I approached, I realized the light was coming from a small back room. Peering around the corner, I saw a scene that made my blood run cold. A young woman was tied to a chair, her face bruised and streaked with tears. Standing over her were two men, one holding a knife. They were talking in hushed tones, their voices menacing. "You think you can just run away?" the man with the knife sneered. "We'll make an example out of you." The woman sobbed, shaking her head in terror. I felt paralyzed, torn between the urge to help and the fear that they'd kill me if they saw me. I took a step back, my foot catching on a loose board. The creak seemed deafening. One of the men looked up, his eyes narrowing. "Who's there?" I bolted, racing through the store and out a back door I hadn't noticed before. I ran through the alleyways, not stopping until I reached a well-lit street. I flagged down a passing car, breathless and frantic, and begged the driver to take me to the police station. I told the cops everything, but when they checked the store, it was empty. No sign of the woman or her attackers. They took my statement but didn't seem hopeful. A few days later, the threats started. Notes slipped under my door, phone calls in the dead of night. Keep your mouth shut, or you're next. I moved my family to a friend's house, but I stayed behind, unable to shake the feeling that they were watching me. The police couldn't, or wouldn't, do anything. Every night, I waited, wondering if tonight would be the night they came for me. The fear gnawed at me, a constant reminder of the horror I'd witnessed. So here I am, waiting, always waiting.